All right, it's time for another episode of Random Thoughts from a Crazed Mind. And today I'm going to be talking about why the Federal Reserve is going to always bail out the stock market. Now, I've already done this video once. It was a video called Why Interest Rates Will Never Increase in Your Lifetime, but nobody watched it, so I can do this video again. In another version. If you want to see a better version of this video, you might want to watch that video. That one was not too bad, actually. So, my one viewer, wherever you are, hello viewer, has watched this video, but nobody else has. So, we're going to talk about why the Federal Reserve is going to always bail out the stock market. So, we are right now in a period where the stock market is coming down. We are in an inflationary environment, and so the Fed was pretty happy with the way things were going. They thought things were going very well, and there was a little bit of inflation, but they were okay with that. You know, they felt like that was well within control, and actually they were probably right. But then Ukraine happened, and then the supply chain breakdown from COVID started to happen, and then you had these kind of monopolization problems that we have now with our corporations, and all this combined and came to a head at the same time, and we went all the way up to 9% inflation all of a sudden, and this was a real shock to the Federal Reserve. They didn't see that coming. It was a perfect storm. And so right now, the Federal Reserve is talking about how they're going to raise interest rates, which they're probably not really ever going to do very much of. They'll probably get their interest rates up to 2%. But that's problematic because the stock market is starting to come down, and this is going to wipe out inflation very quickly. It's already wiping out inflation very fast because most of our economy is based on a high stock market. Our economy has been stock marketized. It's very, very dependent on financial assets being high. And the Federal Reserve knows this, and they want to keep the financial markets perky, because we don't have enough growth in our society to produce the kind of growth it takes to meet the demands of the public. You know, the public has become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and this economy can no longer provide that lifestyle without massive asset speculation, which produces a financialized economy that works well, that kind of flows down to the middle class who are in a lot of finance type jobs, or in jobs that have been created by the finance sector in their speculative frenzy. So we are right now in a transition period where the stock market's coming down to, levels that are making people uncomfortable. And that's starting to put the whammy on inflation. You're not seeing it yet, but you're going to see it. And the Federal Reserve is pretty happy with what's going on. They've kind of faked out the market here. They have said they're going to raise rates when they're actually probably not going to wind up raising rates very much. Maybe 2%, which is about as high as rates can go. So they're going to try to get rates up to about 2%. But the market's thinking 3-4%, something like that. 3.75 or something, which is, there's no way this economy is going to work at a 3.75 interest rate. So that's not going to happen. But this is going to get to the core of the problem. The reason that inflation is going to come down so quickly is because you have to have an ever-increasing stock market to have any economy at all in the United States. And so when that whole stock marketized economy shifts into reverse, all this wealth that's been created through the asset bubbles goes down. it disappears, as happened pretty rapidly with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's at 30,000 now. I think probably a good number of people who invested in Bitcoin are now underwater. And those that aren't certainly lost a lot of their gains. I don't know what the average, maybe 20,000. Some people are in at 20,000. But, there's a lot of damage that's been done in Bitcoin. And a lot of damage that's been done with the stock market, as a matter of fact. But not as much damage that's probably going to be done. But it may be that the Fed can forestall, a real downturn in the stock market and won't have to bail it out. But make no mistake about it, when the stock market gets down to a certain level, the Federal Reserve will bail it out. They will go back to lowering interest rates down to 0 and lowering long-term rates down to 2% or so, which quite frankly is about where they should be, because we don't have an economy really that can justify higher interest rates. And if the stock market is not high, you'll have to start to have changes in the society. In other words, you will have to start changing the social order, which is not something really anybody right now is too interested in, but that's going to happen in the future. So in order to forestall that happening, you're going to need to bail out the stock market over and over again. So we've entered into an age of bailouts. We had a bailout in 2000, bailout in 2008, bailout in 2020, I guess. Was that COVID, 2020? And we're going to have our next bailout coming your way with whatever happens with Ukraine. Maybe we'll get through this for a time, but eventually we're going to get another bailout. And there'll be a bailout after that, and a bailout after that, and a bailout after that. Because if the stock market's not up, you got to have a bailout. So you're going to see this repeat over and over and over again. You're going to have crisis after crisis after crisis, because capitalism has basically come to an end. It's reached its final destination. And so over the next 100 years, we're going to enter into the next ism. We had feudalism, we had capitalism, and then we're going to have the next ism, whatever that is. Some form of socialism, communism, capitalism, some blend of those three. Socialism, communism, basically the same thing, just different slight alterations. And that's basically what our society is today. I mean, we're basically a blend of socialism and capitalism. We've gone a little too far towards the capitalism, so we're going to bring back socialism part of it. And that could, in the next 100 years, get pretty radical. You could go so far as to be there not being any money at all. People would just perform jobs for the sake of society. But I'm not going to talk about that. So, I'm really just rambling here. This is a terrible video, but nobody's going to watch it, so I'm just going to keep going. So, getting back to why we're going to have continual bailouts. So, the best way to understand this is to look at Warren Buffett. Okay, Warren Buffett, great investor. And Warren Buffett is someone that everybody wants to emulate. But what happened to Warren Buffett in 2008? In 2008, Warren Buffett lost every dime he had. If it hadn't been for the bailouts, Warren Buffett would have been wiped out. There would be no portfolio left. He was in all the finance stuff. He got wiped out. And what was Warren Buffett's advice to the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve went to Warren Buffett and said, what should we do? All the assets have gone to zero. What should we do? And Warren Buffett said, bail it out, bail it out. And they said, good idea. And that's what they did. And, we all love Warren Buffett. So when Warren Buffett said, yeah, we need to bail everything out, everybody said, oh, okay, let's do that. And there were some Republicans that got mad because some brown people and some black people were going to maybe get their mortgages paid off or whatever. And so we had the Tea Party. And then we had COVID hit. And so the stock market started to collapse. Things didn't go to zero. We managed to not have a financial crisis full blown. But it was starting. And because it was starting, they came in quick, bailed it out. And we had our second bailout. And so we jacked up the stock market as high as we could get it. And that's where we are now with this really super high stock market that's now creating this massive amount of speculative inflation. And then we're getting oil price inflation from oil shortages. We're having food inflation because there's a problem with eggs, and there's a problem with all kinds of deliveries because of COVID, and when our whole supply chain, just-in-time inventory, broke down, we couldn't supply the things that the way we used to. And so that's become a fundamental problem of our economy, and that's going to be continuing. And so at a certain point, we're going to have the stock market roll over. And that's going to happen probably in the next few years. And when that happens, the Federal Reserve is going to come in and it's going to bail it out. And this is going to happen over and over and over and over again, because you have to have the stock market up, or else you got no economy, because we don't really make anything anymore. We can't really produce anything anymore. That's why we have supply chain problems. We don't make anything. So we have to get our stuff from China. All that gets gummed up. Shelves are bare. Can't get what we need. Now we've got this whole stupid thing going on with Russia, where we were trying to get control of Russia, and Russia's cutting off all of the stuff that's necessary for chips and everything else. People are going to start starving in the Middle East and in Latin America, different places, but probably not Latin America, Africa, because there's going to be a shortage of food. And so all of this has the potential to come together in the fall, and we could see a real downturn in the stock market when all this stuff starts hitting at the same time. And when that happens, you're going to see the Federal Reserve come in, jack up the stock market, because the only way that you can get the economy going is to get the stock market up, get people spending that money, get people going out buying cars, buying all the stuff they don't need, all the junk. And that's because we don't make anything, because we don't have any real natural growth. We can't grow at anything more than maybe 2%, maybe 1%. We don't know what our growth rate is, because we haven't tried it without jacking up the stock market, and we're afraid to. Because if you don't jack up the stock market and things don't work out, then things start happening. New people start being elected. New legislation starts happening. New changes to the social order start being proposed. And changes in the way America does business, bringing jobs back to the United States, taxing the wealthy. All this stuff is going to start to be on the table. So you have to continue to bail out the stock market to avoid that happening. So every time the stock market comes down, you're going to start having these pressures. You got to get it back up. So that's why over time you're never going to see interest rate increases, as I talked about in my last video, which I did a much better job than this one. I wasn't just rambling unprepared. Well, I was rambling unprepared, but I was rambling better. And so you can watch that video as to why interest rates are going to stay low. But again, it's the age of bailouts. It's the Bailoutpalooza. Anytime the market falls, it has to be bailed out. It has to be propped up, because you have to get the market up to have any economy at all. And if the stock market fails, then Warren Buffett loses all of his money. What does Warren Buffett do? He's got no money. I mean, his whole class gets wiped out. There's nothing for them to do. They can't go out and get jobs. They can't go out and start businesses. That class has to be protected. That's who the Federal Reserve represents. And so they're always going to bail out the stock market, because if you don't bail out the stock market, you get no growth. If you get no growth, you got no stock market. So that's where we are. We have a stock market that leads the economy, not an economy that leads the stock market. The stock market is key to the economy. The stock market does not reflect the economy. The economy is the stock market. If you understand that, if you understand that the economy is the stock market, you'll understand why you have all these bailouts and why you're going to continue to have bailouts. And the only way that you cannot have bailouts is you have to restructure the United States, which means you're going to basically have to end capitalism, because capitalism is over, it's done. The only way you can continue capitalism is to continue to bail it out. If you don't do that, you've got to basically have a socialist country. You can have some capitalism, but you can have a level of socialism that the United States at this time considers intolerable. And the only way you can avoid that is to bail out the stock market over and over and over and over again. And that is why we have entered into the age of bailouts, the Bailoutpalooza. And this has been another episode of Random Thoughts from McCrae's Mind, the worst video channel on YouTube. So long, YouTube.